Good day, and welcome back to another DBZ Dokkan Metal video. So in this video I thought I would cover the hidden potential system and just basically give you guys an idea on how you should be building your units. It's gonna be following the APT kind of standard guide that most people follow, and that's kind of the approved way of doing things. And then I will give you guys my thoughts on some other units and just on things in general, so to say. So the first most important thing that you guys need to know is that you must open the bottom right path first, and then the top left path, and then generally I go top right and then bottom left. The reason you need to open the bottom right and the top left path first is because that's where most of your skill orb / hidden potential kind of buffs come from. They got the most stats and they have the most crit, dodge and additional attack nodes, which helps a unit a lot more than super attack modifiers and recovery modifiers. So we'll just take a look at the trunks here just so I can show you what I mean. You'll see you'll get these nodes here, and you can usually choose between crit and evasion, or crit and additional attack, or crit, evasion and additional attack. Most times they come in nodes of +3. But on some units that have lower stat potential systems, you'll see that they'll drop down to maybe a 2 or something. So we'll go to this Piccolo here that we have. I'm going to use this Piccolo to kind of demo things. But essentially, when it comes down to units, crit, combo attack and evasion. So crit and the combo attack both gain 2% per node, whereas evasion only gains 1% per node. In terms of additional attack, basically it gives you a 2% chance to do an additional attack that has a 50% chance of being a super attack. So in essence, each node is a 1% chance at a super attack. With crit, it's a 2% chance to crit, and critting deals 1.9 times the regular amount of damage, ignores defense and ignores type disadvantage. And then evasion is just a 1% chance to evade an attack. Not a super attack or a normal attack, just any attack. It's 1% chance. The only thing is that evasion can obviously be negated by certain bosses, so just keep that in mind when you are taking evasion on units. Generally, it's considered no one will ever tell you to take evasion on a unit. I personally don't suggest taking evasion on units, even the whole 3 dodge thing or anything like that. I just don't suggest evasion on a unit at all. It's not really worth it unless you really need to take a unit into an agility where you're only going to have a you only need it to dodge an additional, then just take evasion and additional. But bear in mind, with EZAs and all that nowadays, it's really not advised to just stick dodge into a unit unless you have multiple copies of them. So I mean, that's just generally the way it is. Even if you max out dodge, it's only 15% chance to dodge an attack, which is not bad, but it's not going to turn any unit into a defensive machine. It's not going to make that unit an absolute beast. But also, one thing we need to keep in mind is the types. So physical starts with 5 additional, strength starts with 5 crit, int starts with 5 dodge, tech starts with 5 crit, and agility starts with 5 additional. And you can see these in the top left hand path. You can get these at 55%. So just bear in mind that some units do start with a certain node. So on all int units you will have dodge. It is unavoidable. So you can't change much about that. But that just makes some units have an innate advantage depending on their passive as well. So always keep that in mind when you are going through your units, that their type will also designate how high their cap is in terms of their additional crit and all of that. So for example, the standard builds just that people really generally focus on, and the kind of stock standard across units, is 20 crit, 6 additional for tech and strength units, 15 crit and 11 additional for agility and physical units, and 15 crit, 6 additional, and obviously 5 dodge for the int units, because you cannot remove their dodge. In terms of this, obviously these can change on a case-by-case basis, but those are generally going to be your standard builds that you do across most units. You'll see here that I gave Turles 3 dodge for literally no reason. Some of my units are old and I'm not able, I didn't know about the system back then or anything like that. So yeah, just keep in mind that at the time I was doing what I thought was correct, or maybe I just wanted to try something different. So if you see a unit having a certain build in this video, don't copy that build exactly, maybe just listen to the tips that I'm giving you in the video. So in some situations, obviously you need to bear in mind that we don't want to take crit. In these situations, it's going to be kind of obvious, and we'll go through it just now, but there are certain units that need certain builds to be efficient. So one of those types of units is the counter unit. These counter units, like Vegito, need full crit. The reason being is that if they do not crit, their additionals are essentially useless. I mean, their counters are essentially useless because they don't do enough damage to pierce the defense threshold of most high challenging events. So it's very important that you keep in mind that certain units are going to require certain builds, and that's going to change how you look at certain units. Counter units need crit. It's non-negotiable. They absolutely need crit. And in doing so, you need to make sure that you follow these kind of guides. Similarly, units that have type advantage need additional. Their 1.5 modifier on their attacks makes it way worth it to take additional. Units like Piccolo here, who lower defense. So lowering defense is underrated in a lot of events, but lowering defense is not necessarily enough of a buff on an attack for us to constantly take additionals for it. If he had lowering defense and raising his own defense, greatly raising, or maybe buffing the rest of the rotation, it would be worth it possibly to take additional. But instead, we're going to follow the standard guide here, and I'm going to select out the correct nodes and show him off with his max capabilities, which you'll see me do now. So the three things you need to keep in mind for whether you should go additional over crit are going to be whether they have a type advantage, so like Strength Super Gogeta, or Int Gogeta, or Int SS4 Gogeta, the LR Gogeta. A lot of the Gogetas have type effective against all types, that's what it's called, and that will allow you to have a 1.5 times modifier, and that basically changes the inherent calculation. So how it works basically is crit. When you crit, you have a 1.9 times modifier on an attack. So let's say, for example, a unit does 10 damage. That means if they crit, they have a 40% chance to do 19 damage. If a unit has an additional and it supers, they do 2.2 times the damage. So a unit that does 10 damage will do 20 damage. But because it's only a 50% chance to super, that means their chance to do damage is halved, which means their chance to do a total damage drops down to 15 damage. And that's slightly lower than the crit, as you can see, 19 to 15. If a unit has a 1.5 times modifier though, that means that their next attack won't be doing 5 damage. Their next attack has at most a chance of doing 7.5 damage. And their base attack does 1.5 times damage. So it all of a sudden makes the calculation a lot more favorable in terms of additionals. So it's just something to keep in mind when you obviously go through these things. And then like I was saying earlier, if you look here, you can see that there's certain stat systems like this for this Goten, Trunks, and Marin card that has a lower stat threshold than other units. And so therefore also their hidden potential nodes are also at a lower threshold than other units. So yeah, just keep that in mind. But as I was saying, counter units also, you're going to want to have crit on, because otherwise their counters are not going to be effective. And then going back to AA, the last condition is obviously if a unit has the ability to crit, let's say more than 40%, 49%, 50% of the time they have a high chance to crit built into their passive. Building additional on them is probably more worthwhile due to the fact that they innately already have a decent chance to crit built in. So, that being said, and keeping all that in mind, the next thing you're going to want to look at is my mistakes, like the Strength Gogeta, where I put crit on him originally in the beginning because I didn't understand the game. So I didn't know that super effective against all types was a modifier that would make him do more damage against everyone. I didn't understand what it meant. So I put crit on him because I thought crit would be cool, and I would just split crit and additional. Now compared to the agility Gogeta I made when I understood the game's mechanics, and you can see that his additional is just way higher. And that's because I understand that Gogeta not only at base level is super effective against all types, but when he transforms he crits. Please bear in mind also units that have certain effects on their SAs or passives that you may want to consider when you do that. A lot of the time support units also will have certain effects on their SAs you may want to continue, and these things you're going to have to keep in mind. For example, lowering attack is a super helpful ability in Super Battle Road and a lot of content, so you may want the units to have additional, because if they're greatly lowering attack, it's going to help mitigate a lot more damage than them possibly doing a bit more damage. In terms of stunning, can they seal? Sealing is guaranteed, stunning is a chance. So if your unit seals, there's no need to give them additional, unless on the off chance maybe they finish a unit and then additional to seal another unit, which is a very specific situation. You're going to want to go crit. If your unit stuns or has a chance to stun, you may want to go additional, especially if it's a high chance, because if they miss the first stun, they will at least have a chance again to get another one. Do they stun on normal attack from their passive? Then you may want to give them also additional. Do they stun on super attack? Stunning on super attack gives you 2 turn stuns. Stunning on passive gives you 1 turn stuns, but it's guaranteed. So you keep these things in mind when you are building your units. And so I would suggest personally that stunning or high chance or medium chance to stun along with lowering attack are reasons enough to give support type units at least more additional than crit in certain situations. That being said, also you need to just keep in mind what your unit does. This Gohan, for example, transforms into a unit that is highly effective against all types. In most hard content, SBR, LGE, you're going to transform to this Gohan. Therefore, give him additionals. Similarly with Trunks, who transforms into a unit that's also highly effective against all types. You're going to want to give him additional. Some units like Bardock, for example. Bardock and Cooler are examples. I don't have Cooler, but I'll show you on Bardock. Bardock is highly effective against all Wicked Bloodlines enemies, and he stacks defense. Bardock, when he transforms, gets highly effective against all extreme type enemies and develops built-in crit. Bardock is definitely an additional unit. Cooler as well becomes a crit machine against Saiyans, which is one of the largest categories in the game, and Hybrid Saiyans, so you're going to want to also put additional on Cooler. He also greatly lowers attack and defense in his first form. Go additional. But this Cooler here has built-in additionals. If you have built-in additionals and you have a little bit of additional as well, he's going to already super quite often, so give him crit, because that's going to magnify his damage a lot more. These type of things you just want to keep in mind, obviously, as you go along. So if a unit has built-in additionals in their passive, generally take a look at taking crits. If they have built-in counters in their passive, look at taking crits. If they have built-in super effective against all types, look at taking additionals. That's the general rule that I can give you, but so just continue about that. In terms of stacking units, so stacking on SA, so for an example, take a look at that Gohan. He greatly stacks attack and defense each turn. By giving him additional, he can greatly stack a lot faster than other units. Some units also will greatly stack over 3 or 6 turns. By giving them additional, they can double up on these stacks, and some of these stacks are 50%, 60%, 100%. So they can stack up defense quite rapidly. That is incredibly helpful, but it also has a caveat as well, because sometimes raising defense is not always the same as finishing an event earlier. As I commonly say in SBR, sometimes you need to actually win the fight before it gets too late that you can defend the fight. So you just need to keep in mind, what is the unit stat base, how quickly will it stack defense. I, for example, like to usually double up. If a unit raises defense and also lowers attack, I always definitely take additional. If a unit only raises defense, they have a low stat base, and in their passive they don't really have anything else that benefits from additionals, then generally I'll just take crit on some minor support cards. Like this Kale and Kefla, this Kale and Caulifla LR, I give them crit because yes, they only guarantee additional against certain types of units, but they already have some additional from their hidden potential, and they have a little bit of an additional from their passive, plus they can crit. So it's good to just give them that crit to allow them to stack. But then, as I said before, this Gohan and Goku, you give additional. There are certain units that just completely bypass the system, like this Tech Vegeta here, who you're going to want to give all additional because you want him to build up to that 150% passive as soon as possible on his attack. These sort of things are not, these are difficult to tell, and generally just go with your gut feeling. So he super attacks so often and he super attacks so rapidly that by giving him additionals you can just really build him up that much quicker. And then there's some units that are certain exceptions to the rule, like this Topper or the physical Trunks that I use for my Future Saga team. They buff allies attack by 30%. Trunks, not so much now, is great in the first slot, but he used to be really good for events in the first slot with his EZA. He had enough defense to tank. And by giving these guys additionals, if they get 1 or 2 off, they'll really buff up the rest of the rotation. But that being said, I hope this video helps you guys in just understanding better the hidden potential system. I did give you guys the standard builds, I gave you the standard explanations, and I've just gone through a couple different units so that you can understand how they work. As you can see with this Trunks, he gains a whole bunch of attack stats per turn, he stacks attack and defense on his super attack, and when he goes to his final phase he's highly effective. So I went for additional on my Trunks. I think it's doing the best call, but generally I'll go for a split, favoring one slightly higher than the other. With equipment now, you can hit pretty high stats on both, so it's not as big of an issue as it used to be, and making mistakes can still be corrected well enough that it doesn't matter. And then, as I said before, units like Gotenks who stack greatly for a couple turns, you may want to take additional on. But thanks for watching, guys. I hope this video helps you. I hope it lets you understand the hidden potential system more. And I'll see you in the next one. Cheers and bye.